It's finally time for an Arthur Rackham master study. The reason this illustrator's work is legendary, in my opinion, has less to do with how he perfectly captures the essence of fairy tales and fantasy. It's his line work. There's a beautiful logic to it. That's why his illustrations read so well. And then there's also a wild side to his approach to mark making. In this video, we'll be rendering 3 studies in pen and ink and adding color to 2 of them. I'll also be sharing how I did the studies and what was interesting about Rackham's work in hopes that it will inspire you as well. If you're new here, I feature different pen and ink illustration masters, usually suggested by you, the viewer. Doing master studies is one of the activities that's helped grow my pen and ink skills in just a few years to what you see today. Be sure to subscribe to my email list so you can catch when your favorite master artists come out. I'm so glad you're here. Now let's jump back into Arthur Rackham. First thing is research and getting acquainted with the master's work. Then I flag several pieces based on my goals and curiosity. It so happens that I've been experimenting with color mediums to mix with pen and ink. Rackham is noted for combining watercolor techniques with his pen and ink drawings. Of course, you'll never know what will surprise you during these studies. When looking over his works, what struck me with admiration is how he is fearless with details. Look at these trees. So for the studies, we'll dive into Rackham's logical line work. We'll observe how he combines classic line weights in the foreground and wild brushwork in the back, which makes his compositions magically harmonious, kind of like a mullet haircut. Business in the front and party in the back. Let's start with Alice in Wonderland, a perfect example of this mullet haircut effect. Look at the trees. I cropped a section to do a mini study in my Moleskine art sketchbook. This is where I keep most of my studies. Having the studies in a single book makes it easier to track progress over time. For the underdrawing, Rackham does these loose, doodly patterns. This approach to rendering communicates the form and contributes to visual storytelling. The way I crop the image, we get a bony hand in the foreground, which turns out to be serendipitous because the way Rackham depicts bone structure is pretty iconic. You'll notice that he's very consistent with how he draws his bony creatures. It's exaggerated. For this piece, I'm using a Hunt 101 Imperial artist nib from Speedball. It's soft and has a good range from thin to thick lines. I gave Mr. White Rabbit a furry, textured outline, except for the sharp, bony hands. Speaking of hands, if you're wondering about my glove, it's to keep the skin off the inking surface. I'm traveling on the page front to back, left to right, because I'm right-handed, and then there's fewer chances for smudging the ink working this way. You can see that I'm varying the line weight. This is what I was saying about the logic of the master's line work. With Alice, the details of her dress are thinner, less detailed, compared to the bolder lines for her hair and face, where our attention should be. The lines in the very forefront, or closest to the viewer, are also bolder than the lines that are further away. And that is the classic protocol for line work. Following this classic method contributes to the illusion of depth. It informs the viewer what's in front and what's behind in the picture plane. He follows this protocol until you get to the trees. Then we're experiencing the mullet haircut effect. Business in the front, party in the back. It's somehow genius and fascinating that this style works. The classic method would be to render the background with the thinnest lines and the fewest details. Rackham goes wild with his backgrounds. Plus, he uses a brush, so even thicker, and it's really audacious, yet restrained. He held off with the crazy brushwork with the very back layer, which is thinner and appropriately abstract. He did it this way to describe distance. Just like that, the composition clicks into harmony. For the finishing touches, I dropped down to a smaller nib, my Tachikawa T99. I went ahead penciling a study of Brynhildr. I sketched her figure, aiming to get the proportions and dimensions to fit the illustration in my sketchbook. then layered the clothing on the body parts. Her Valkyrie kit is elegantly detailed. This is the other thing he does that showcases his level of mastery. Tons of details that seem to only appear when you focus on them. Because he's such an accomplished draftsman, everything looks cohesive. Nothing's distracting the viewer from the storytelling of this piece. The tonal values of the coloring tie it all together, making the illustration look clean and simple. I'm taking mental note of the light source, which is top left, casting shadows on her face from the leafy trees. Going ahead with the ink application, starting with the face with that small Tachikawa 99 nib, I continue with this nib for the key details like her hands, armor, and feet. Adding to the shadows on the first pass, there's very little rendering, so the values are expressed mostly through line weight. The color will enhance this effect. Now I'm ready for the 101 nib, tackling the drapery of her robe, her hair, and helmet wings. Her armor reminds me of Kentaro Miura's designs for Griffith and Berserk. Oh, another mullet. It would not be a surprise that Rackham was an influence on Master Miura's work. The line work logic is similar. Both masters are known for cleanly executed, intricate detail. Now for the background. She's clearly on a mountaintop or in the mid-subalpine, seeing the smaller trees here. I started the texture with my pen, but quickly realized that since he used the brush, I may as well too. But before grabbing my brush, I inked an indication of branches and filled in the tighter spots to frame the character with solid black using my nib. Okay, now with the brush. Starting with the blades of grass, then the clusters of leaves. I know the secret is to keep the pattern consistent for leaves to look believable, and it's very patient work. Once the ink was completely dried, I started with the golden hour sky and traveled back to front on the picture plane. I did paint wet on wet, blending the hues right on the paper, but not overly wet because this is a hot press paper and will warp with too much water. So there we have it. Let me know in the comments which of these two studies you preferred. The first one, ink only in black and white, or the second, ink with color. If you want to stick around for the last study, I have more insights about his techniques. This particular sketchbook paper is for dry mediums only, so I used the brush pen for the party in the back, a set of fine liner pens for the classic line work, and applied color to the full scene using pencil. Repeating the same sequence in my process as with the other two studies, using the smallest tip for the faces, hands, and other detailed designs in the composition, and then moved on to a bigger tip for the character in the very forefront to match the line weights that the master used in his illustrations. Smallest tips in the background and bigger in the forefront, except, again, when we get to the trees. But that's his signature style. The technique I noticed here is whenever the lines join at a different plane angle, he builds that section gradually. The effect on the overall illustration is subtle. It's a small thing, but it adds so much finesse to the line work. I had already picked my color palette, aiming to match the master's illustration, because his color choices are important. See how the ladies are further above the middle ground? They're off to the side, yet are the first point of interest because of that contrasting red. Then our eye goes to the bonhomme in the front of the scene. Note his orange hat. You'd think that the giant tree in the center would be the main attraction, but it isn't. It blends seamlessly into the other shades of brown to support the characters. The key takeaways from doing these studies of Arthur Rackham's works were: it is safe to follow the classic protocol for line weights, bold in the front, thin in the back. Especially anything closer to the viewer would have thicker line weights. But we also saw there are exceptions to this line weight logic, as Rackham demonstrated in his backgrounds for the trees in particular. It could have been a disaster, but he managed to create a harmonious feel by unifying the composition through the use of subtle details, like how he joins the plane angles, and through judicious choices in color. And that's why his illustrations read so well. Thank you for suggesting this master. I had a lot of fun. I hope you did as well. If yes, give it a like. I'll see you in the next one.